am Shwetha Shantharam. I am a product manager at MetricStream. In today's session, I will be taking you over a latest innovation in our IT and cyber risk management product. In today's changing world and the unprecedented impact of the global pandemic has highlighted the interconnectedness of the risk and the velocity at which the risk landscape can change. Also, in this changing environment, it also has led to digitization of a lot of business processes, which has triggered a greater volume, or rather, has triggered a rise in threat, risk, and vulnerability landscape. However, often we see that the cyber risk teams and the business teams do not always talk the same language. Hence, it is important for cyber teams to articulate the cyber risk or the risk or a security incident that they face in a way that businesses can understand. This is where our latest innovation on quantification helps, where quantification of the risk uh, can be articulated in terms of monetary values when a security or a risk incident happens. We at MetricStream are constantly innovating to address some of these emerging trends and in the market, and also trying to address some of these challenges. One of our latest innovation in the IT and cybersecurity space is the cyber risk quantification. So we have a new framework that will help organization to express the impact of the risk in terms of monetary value. This framework supports the FAIR methodology or the FAIR quantification model. Apart from that, this is built in such a way that it can actually fit in any of the other custom quantification models. With that, let's see some of the what are some of the key features of this framework. When performing any assessments, the questions or the factors that we use are very essential for a risk assessment, and with this framework, it is entirely configurable. And also, the expressions or the formula that is required to arrive at the monetary value or to express the impact of the risk in terms of monetary value, we have a formula builder where you can write your own expressions using the responses of your factors to arrive at the final dollar amount. And also in IT world, we are always dealing with large volumes of asset risk, threats, processes, etc. And when you have to perform an assessment on your IT infrastructure, for example, and with such large volume of data, it becomes extremely critical, and it also becomes extremely critical to scope the right assets at the right time. Also, having to do this manually is extremely tedious. That is why with our new framework, we have something called as rule-based scoping, where you can write expressions or rules or formula or have predefined rules to arrive at the scoping. And when we talk about quantification, because of its nature, they are best suited to be automated. So, with our new framework, you can in fact automate the responses to your questions or factors by writing simple APIs. So, with that, let's quickly move ahead and see a quick sneak peek into how this particular framework works. So, I am logging into our MetricStream M7 integrated platform. I'm logging in as a cybersecurity manager. So, I, as a manager, want to perform a quantitative assessment for, let's say, all those particular assets which I did not assess in the last fiscal year. So, in this form, this consists of three main aspects: how, what, and who. You begin with providing certain basic information about the assessment, like a name and what is the purpose of performing this. And when it comes to the how part, this is where the how part is taken care of. So, what you see as a profile is basically a setup which consists of all your factors that you want to use for your risk assessment and the expressions or the formula that is required to arrive at the monetary value. All these are clubbed together in a profile, and as I said, this is entirely configurable. And the next part, of course, is around what is the dollar amount, or the what is the currency in which you want to see the final output, that you can go ahead and select here. With that, let's see the what part. When I say what part, you are trying to understand what is that I want to assess. Do I want to assess a risk, a set, and a threat combination? Or am I looking to assess an organization against a particular risk, a set, and threat and vulnerability combination? Or am I looking to, let's say, assess a specific risk on a set of assets and threats? So if I say I want to assess a risk against a asset and threat, now I have identified what I want to assess, but what are those exact assets, risk, threats that I want to assess? To do that, you have something called a scope type. Manual, as the name suggests, is self-explanatory, where you manually go ahead and pick up the values for your set and threat. But if I say build rule, and you can go ahead and select what risk you want to assess and click on select scope. Here is where you can go ahead and build your own expressions. For example, asset. If I want all the assets whose business criticality, for example, is medium, and I want all the threat whose threat strength, for example, is high, right? And when I say fetch scope, this will tell me that I have around 3 assets and 5 threads that I have to assess, which gives me a combination of 50. And that is what you see here. This is where you can see the scope that you will get to assess. But there are always circumstances or exceptions to these rules and expressions that you write. In such cases, if you do not want to assess a specific combination, you can always go ahead and delete them from the scope. This is one way of arriving at a scope. But let's say, for example, I want to assess an organization against a specific risk for a set of asset, threat, and vulnerability combination. If I want to do that, one way we saw was build rule. The second way is called as scan rule. So what is the scan rule? The scan rule is nothing but predefined rules that you can write, where you can have your own business logic to arrive at the scope. For example, this is a single click. Once you write your rules, all you have to do is just click on the rule and select which rule you want to use to get the details. So in this case, I'm saying assets not assessed in the last year is what I want to uh, assess or scope it for this particular risk assessment. And when I say fetch scope, it will show me what is that specific business unit again, and what is the specific risk against which I have to perform an assessment, and what are those asset, threat, and vulnerability combination. These are the information on which you will be able to perform an assessment. And again, here also, if something is not relevant for this execution of assessment, you can go ahead and delete them from the scope. That is about the what part of the assessment. Now comes the who part. This basically tells me who is going to perform the risk assessment. So I can go ahead and select, let's say I have an assessor who will go ahead and do that. Then I can go ahead and select who is the approver who will be approving the risk assessments once done. And I can go ahead and give a due date, which tells me by when I should go ahead and complete this assessment. So with these three aspects, you go ahead and input this form, and you are good to go for your risk assessment. So if I submit this, I will get an assessment as an assessor. So let me log in as a cyber security assessor or an analyst who will be responding to the assessments. So I have a task here, cyber risk assessment for Q1 of 2021. And I, as an assessor who is responding to the assessment, this is what I will see. I will see a general section where I will see certain details about why I'm doing this assessment. And this section will tell me against what I'm doing the assessment, because I should know, because my responses basically depends upon the scoped items. So you will be able to see what is the organization, what is the risk, and what asset threat vulnerability combination. So this depends upon the kind of assessment that you're doing. If you're doing a simple risk asset threat, you won't see vulnerabilities here. So depending upon the combination you have selected, you will see the respective information. And the most important part is all about the assessment itself. So as I said before, the way we arrive at the factors and formula is entirely configurable in this framework. And the sample that you see here is that of FAIR. And here, as you see, this is a questionnaire-based assessment. And having a questionnaire based assessment gives you flexibility to have your own response type, like a yes or no, or a numeric value, or a number, or anything that is relevant for your factor response. You can set that up. And also, it gives you the flexibility to make a certain factor as mandatory or optional or even conditional. So, if we take an example of FAIR, FAIR tells us that if you know your loss event frequency, then you don't have to go further down and get the values for that. If you directly know it, if you know it at the top level, go ahead and provide the answer. But let's say if I do not know that, I have to figure out what is my threat event frequency, vulnerability, and even if I don't know my threat event frequency, I can arrive at that using my contact frequency or the probability of action. So having a questionnaire based assessment gives you that flexibility of setting that these questions as conditional. So depending upon the responses, you will be either be able to respond to it or not, or have you can have it disabled because you already have provided an answer at a higher level. And if you notice in this, as soon as I loaded the screen, you see that some of the responses were auto populated or pre-populated. That is because I have automated the responses of these questions, and this is the icon which will tell you that they are automated. And since it's been automated, there has been an API written where it fetches the value from a different system, and the value of that is auto-populated here. So what happens with this? It saves a lot of effort for an assessor, where they don't have to come and manually fill in the assessment responses, and also saves a lot of time and leads to an error-free assessment. Similarly, if you see, I have more questions which were automated, and depending upon the responses, all of them have been pre-populated here. Now, when we talk about quantification, the ultimate goal is to arrive at a monetary value. And how we do that is, for example, in this case, the summary section here showcases the final output of the assessment that you perform. So in this case, my annual loss exposure that you see as $96,000 is basically the product of my loss event frequency and loss magnitude. And how did I arrive at my loss event frequency and loss magnitude? Loss event frequency is the product of my threat event and the vulnerability value, which gives me a value of 8. And similarly, my loss magnitude is a sum of primary loss and the secondary loss, which gives me a loss magnitude of $12,000. So that is how I have been able to arrive at a monetary value. And this shows me the what is the impact of having a certain risk in your organization, and how does that translate into dollars and cents. And when performing any assessment, if you have noticed any observations, or if there are issues, we give you the ability where you can go ahead, log them as issues, or let's say if there is an existing issue which is related to this, you can go ahead and tag an existing issue for this assessment. So this was a sneak peek of how a risk assessment can be performed using our quantitative framework and arrive at a monetary value based on the responses that you provide to your assessment. And we also saw how some of the questions can be automated, and this framework remains flexible to accommodate different kind of quantification models. So that was a quick sneak peek. So with that, let's quickly look at what is the value of having a quantification model. We at MetricStream Each of our innovations over the years have been used by our customers across industries in different geographical locations to make real time risk aware decisions that boost business performance, strengthens the resilience, and enhances the brand reputation. Similarly, our current innovation on cyber risk quantification will help assess the security risk factors in terms of monetary value, measure the effectiveness of the security controls and programs currently in place, and also provide you analytics around this so that a CISO or a cybersecurity manager can go ahead and justify the security cost and also for the future enhancement. Apart from this, what are some of the other key business values that we see is it lowers the impact of the IT incidents and minimizes the business disruptions. It also reduces the compliance violations, penalties, and the risk of reputational damage. And the most important, it builds a confidence amongst the leadership, board members, and even the regulators, which showcases a mature and agile IT and cyber governance program. With that, I would like to thank you for attending this session on latest innovation in our M7 integrated platform. I hope you found this useful, and I would also urge you to attend other sessions on some of our innovations, and I'm sure that will be beneficial to your organization. Thank you.